broadcast community. It is another Tackle It Thursday here and the Bounce Up community. I am Mj Callaway, one of your co-hosts, and my rock star co-host is
Jim Kunkle. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. And we're so thrilled that you are with us today with the topic about a toxic audit, which seems to grab a lot of attention. So the reason for this is we are coming up on the winter holidays, and it seems like during the holidays, we get a lot more people who tend to be Grinches than they are festive. So, but also it seems we do have a lot of toxicity in our workplaces as well as in our professional lives. And as Jim and I were talking earlier, toxic doesn't mean a big toxic environment. It can be something so simple as negative words. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Well, I was amazed when I took a look at what the Harvard Business School had done with research, just to see how much of an impact it came to businesses, but also too some of the other research that I found last night was related to on the personal side. So you can have some toxic events that might be personal in your personal life or in your business life. So it does cover such a wide area of our daily lives.
It sure does. And in the research that I have done within my book, Bounce Up, one of the things that I had found fascinating, but yes, also alarming, was one negative word, just one, can actually shut down the brain's function and the logic, the reasoning, and also the language centers of the brain. Just one negative word, which is unreal when you think about it. So when it happens, think about this. Anytime someone has made a negative comment to you and you've stepped back and you either, you just froze, you didn't know what to respond or what to say back. That's what happens because the brain's function just shut down. I'm not sure how to respond to it. So it's crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, with the Harvard research, it showed that an 80% impact on productivity from toxic events that happen where, to your point, people will shut down and they're not focused on their work or their daily activities, and that it has a major impact on businesses when it comes to productivity, but also personal productivity if this is happening in your daily life.
Definitely. And when we think about it from an overview, what could we be accomplishing if we had the toxic or the negativity out of our life? How much more productive we could be, how much happier we could be all the way around.
That's a good point. And for myself, when I encounter anyone who might be what I would consider a toxic person, I take that into account. And sometimes you can't change somebody, but you can help coach them or help show them what they're doing is obviously not correct and needs to be fixed. But I don't take it personal. I don't let it bother me. And I've used this description before, where in situations where there's chaos or it might be some toxicity going on, I pretend or imagine myself, not say the word pretend, but imagine myself as a rock that's in a fast moving stream, and just be that steady rock in there and just let that fast rushing water flow over you. So don't let it drag you down. Don't let it bother you. Process it, take it in, process it, and try to bounce up, try to move beyond that. But also, again, it might be a situation to help a coworker understand. Maybe they don't realize what they're doing. In some cases, sometimes these toxic events happen, and it's very obvious that they did mean to react the way they did or say what they said, and it causes that situation.
And sometimes that's a learned behavior that they have from someone in their family. So it can be, and if we can find a way to help them shift to transform what they're saying. I love with your rock. I had worked for a company that could be at times not so fun to work with. I'll just say that. And I called it my happy shield. So because there were a few nitpickers, what I call nitpickers. So nitpickers or naysayers who you're never going to make that work. You're never going to get that sale. I'd say, oh, there's my happy shield. Whatever you say just bounces off of it. And it had gotten to the point where I had actually said that out loud to a couple of project managers. And then it lightened the situation around the office because they would laugh about it. But I really meant it, similar to you with your rock. It was, let's have that happy shield here and let that bounce off.
Yeah, and I was never like that. I used to take this in. It would bother me. I'd get, ill in the stomach. I would hate to go to work. I would literally have panic attacks, but it never really accomplished anything. It never really made me a better person. And so when you realize sometimes with these situations, again, you have to be able to address them. You have to be able to process them, but you can't let them drag you down, because now all of a sudden that situation has been compounded and it makes it even worse. And it's a cascading event. Others around you see that you're being impacted, you're being affected because of a toxic situation. It's just going to continue to snowball and grow and grow and grow. And, as we, in the pre-stream, we were talking, it can literally drag a company under and wipe out a company or a family or a friendship.
It can definitely. And then what happens is the company, we'll use a company for an example, is they lose good people because of toxic people. So one of the stats that I came across when I was doing some research was SHRM. It's a report from SHRM that 2 in 5 people will leave a company because of a toxic environment. So when we think about that, we're losing good people, and it does. It affects the bottom line, productivity, and also the culture. So being aware of it.
Yeah, I definitely would be in that statistic. I have left at least 2 companies and positions because of situations like that. These were situations that no matter how much I would try, it would never resolve itself. So,
yes. The one company because part of a toxic environment can also be the lack of work-life balance. And the one company that I left, and this is a company that I sold 3 times my sales quota. So I was the only female in the top 5. I was selling 3 times my sales quota, doing great, financially with that company. There wasn't a work-life balance. There were times where I was working 19 straight days. And that is, you can't sustain that. You can't sustain that personally or professionally. So that also plays into what could be a toxic environment. And Jim, what I found is that we don't always realize, and this is why I call it a toxic audit, we don't always realize because it happens a little bit at a time. It's like that, if you've ever heard that story, frog soup. You can throw a frog into boiling water and he will jump out. You can throw a frog into lukewarm water and slowly turn up the heat, and then he ends up frog soup. So I think that's what happens to us. We allow it to happen, as you mentioned, one time, and then another, and it compounds. It's unintentional who we have in our circle or the situation that we're in at the moment. So when we take an intentional look at who's in our inner circle, who we're spending our most time with, and our work situation, our family situation, and we look at it from a different perspective, then we realize that we do have a little bit more toxic people or toxic situations or behaviors than what if we didn't take that look.
what I really like about a toxic audit, the 2 companies I talk about had high turnover rate. Never could really, for whatever reason, they seem to never been able to figure out exactly why they had such a high turnover rate. If they were to do a toxic audit, that might have been how they could have caught the situations that were going on. And everyone has a different definition of what toxic is. We have,
Yes.
let's say like a threshold of toxic, we can deal with the pain a little bit until it gets to a point where we say, okay, we got a problem, we got a situation, or I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. So in doing a toxic audit, you're going to be able to figure out exactly what the current situation is, where the issues might be, and then what could be the corrective actions. Could it be more training in a certain area? Could there be some disciplinary? Could there be some realignment of the team? There's so many different ways to deal with it and not go more toxic to fight the toxic situations.
Right.
So the toxic assessment is such a critical part. And I would probably say, if I was a business owner and I had a team of people working, I might want to routinely do an audit. If I'm going to do quality checks, I might as well do a toxic audit just to make sure, because guess what? Every year, what is toxic this year, something different could be toxic the next year. And you never know unless you really go through and do an audit and figure out exactly what the current situation is.
Absolutely, especially because we are in such changing times.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is fluid, everything is changing constantly with whatever is happening in our current, with current events. So by doing that, you think about it, if you did that once a quarter or bi-yearly, how much better your workplace would be by doing it.
And I think it also shows to your staff, your team, that you truly do care, that you're going to look for these things, and you want to have a productive, safe, and when it comes to mental stress, try to reduce that amount of mental stress so that people can be more focused on their careers, their jobs, and what their mission is to help the company grow.
Definitely. And that's a lot of what can help is bringing someone from the outside in, someone who has a different perspective. Because as staff will actually open up more to somebody who's outside the organization than someone who is inside the organization. So you will be able to really dig down and find out truly what is causing, if it's one person or if it's more, or if it's the way that progress is happening. Sometimes it is, and I'll give an example. When I had worked for one corporate company, the director of sales would, and I only know this because one of my clients caught her doing it. She would stand outside my office door and listen to my conversations. And then afterwards, she would kind of nitpick about the way I was doing things. And I can remember one time she said, MJ, you're not following the script. And then my comment back to her was, well, so-and-so, because I don't want to say her name, do you want me to sell or do you want me to use the script? And at that time, I was selling 3 times my sales quota. So whatever I was doing in the way of how I was having that conversation with clients, it was working.
That's a great example. And I actually, in a past job, had the same situation where with what was more important, was it, having a quality sale, or was it following a script? And a lot of times, the script might be good for certain situations, but then there's situations where you want to have that more flexibility and free flow, because you have to be able, if you're working with a customer or a client or prospect, you have to be able to match and mirror what they're doing, but also too, you want to have some level of control in that sales call. So it's important to, kind of influence them to go to the right direction to say yes.
Agree with you there. One of the stats that I had pulled that has to do with sales is that an optimistic salesperson will actually outperform a pessimistic salesperson with better sales skills by 57%. Is that crazy?
Yeah, it's amazing. With these, like I say, the research last night that I saw was just absolutely outstanding, and you had done a lot as well. So it's so fascinating when you think about it.
And when it comes down to it, what would you think? We need more training in our companies more training, maybe on social skills or emotional intelligence, in addition to whatever skills that they might need. So
I
how would that play into it?
I think that the training, especially in the emotional intelligence, how to deal with difficult situations, are always great training. And then the other thing is, I think team building exercises that you can do, and having, let's call them, you want to call it a coffee talk or sometime to talk. You want to have an open environment where you can express exactly, how you feel, and also to what situations that you're finding yourself in, or, occurrences that are happening without repercussions. And so anytime you can have that dialogue, it's going to help a lot, because you want to deal with any situations before they become problems. But it also shows to your staff, your team, and your employees that you really truly care about them, and they're an important part of the company or the organization.
Yes. There is one company, and it's Cohen Woodworking. He actually is one of the people that I interviewed in my book, as you've read. What I loved about his mission is he wants his employees to go home happy. So whatever they do in the day-to-day job, he wants it to be something that will make that person happy. And most of his employees have been through some type of trauma. That's where he focuses on people that have been through trauma. But his is to teach them how, and to instruct them, to train them to be better people, because his mission is for them to be better at home. And I thought, what a great mission.
Yeah, that is that. It really shows, true leadership, and also to someone who really cares. And I've worked for companies that really care about your personal life as much as they do your professional life. So that goes a long way.
It definitely does. So one of the things, Jim, when we think about it, and someone happens to be giving you some toxic comments, one of the things what we can do is we can shift that conversation rather than react. Let's figure out a way how to respond to it as positively as we can.
Yeah, I always take a step back, because you usually, if you
Yes.
react first and quickly, it's not the right way. It's not really what you wanted to do. So it's best to take step back, assess it, think of what you're going to say, and then say it. But also, too,
And
you want to stand your ground too. You don't want to, say something and then say, well, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. You really need to stick to your belief. And if the situation is really bad, then maybe what you do is you don't say anything, and then that's where you have to get a supervisor, a director, a boss, or some other type of third party to come in that situation.
own it. Own whatever your response is, own your behavior, own your presence. So, because if someone knows that it gets to you,
Hmm.
they will keep doing it. So, if you, as you said, stand your ground, own it. Don't second guess yourself, but own it. Own that professional presence too. So, pull those shoulders back. When I had worked for another company, there was a manager who liked to get in your space. He would always get in your space, and I would say he was pretty negative. So one of the things that I had learned to do, and he was like 6'2", so I'm 5'2", a foot bigger than me. One of the things that helped me was I would use my hands. I used them all the time anyway as I talk, but I would use them more. I would make myself bigger by taking and using hand motions, putting those shoulders back, looking up to him. But I would never take the step back because he wanted me to take that step back. It was more of an intimidation I felt. So making yourself bigger and using those hands, because there was one time I'm using my hands and it just happened to, tap him. I was like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I use my hands all the time. So he took a step back that time, but it's owning that presence. Whatever it is, just stand in it. As you said, stand in your and your ability, stand in your beliefs, your core values.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too with that is it could cause him to pause or do an interruption to him because he's so used to a certain pattern. And as humans, we all look for patterns, we follow patterns, and if you can disrupt that pattern, it might actually it might throw him off his game. Let's say when it comes to being toxic.
Definitely, because he took a step back,
Yeah.
which was something he had not previously done. So just trying to figure out how you can work within your parameters of it. So that's in talking about respond. I a lot of times will ask a question. So because people are not always used to having a question whenever they say something derogatory, if you come back with a question, then it makes them, as you said, it makes them pause. It gives them, now they're used to controlling the situation. When we ask a question, we actually put ourselves in the driver's seat there. Have you tried that, Jim?
I have not, but that's something I'm going to do moving forward.
I love asking questions
Yeah.
because it helps me not only understand them, come from their perspective, possibly they can share more, but for me, it gives me an opportunity to do that pause, to ask that question so that I'm not reacting.
Yeah, I you know, I think the statement always is, he who speaks first loses. And so if I'm in a situation where it's toxic, again, I'm going to take it in, I'm going to assess it. And then to your point, you said earlier, own it. I'm going to stick with what my response is going to be. But I don't want to fight toxic with toxic.
No.
And so that's why and with we being humans, being emotional animals, we have to be very careful because in a toxic situation that might be very, very negative or confrontational, you might over emotionalize it versus trying to negate it or alleviate the situation or change the situation. And I think to your point, I like the own it, but also to try to change up that pattern where, as you did, you used your hands, you strong shoulders, head up, and everything like that to throw them off their game if that's their approach when it comes to being toxic.
There was one other little technique that I would use, and that would, whatever someone had said, rather than responding, I would say, I'm going to get a bottle of water or a cup of coffee. Would you like one? Let's have something to drink and then we'll sit down and talk about it. And then it gave us both a chance to pause, but it also gave them, there's something about food and drink when someone has something in their hand, it actually changes some of the chemicals in their brain. I don't know the full brain science behind it, but there's something about it. And then what I would do is I would guide them to a seat because I didn't want them to be towering over me. So when we were both, and I would try to find the most comfortable chair in the building or in the office, because when you're sinking down in something comfortable, you don't have that full confrontational, posture there. So that was another one of my tips. I did that a lot with challenging customers.
That's really good tips right there. And I've heard that used before in other situations where you're trying to again focus a person you're talking with, and it sometimes is to take them out of their environment, put them in a new environment, give them an activity, which would be that bottle of water, or maybe you're having an office donut together, and have that change of environment really to help reset, let's say, the situation or reset the conversation.
Yes. And then one thing that I learned from my wellness coach, one of the things, oh, Ben said, give them a cause to pause. Right.
There you go.
So, and we want to say hi to Gabe and also to Heidi. Heidi, yes, the productivity stat was awesome. So we appreciate that Jim pulled that out. So one of the other things that I learned from a wellness coach, a friend of mine, Laura Greco, she would always say, whenever you get to a high high emotional state, whether it is me or whether it was someone else. And as long as I knew this person, I could do it. I would keep bubbles on hand. So bubbles, because when you're blowing a bubble, you actually have to slow down and you actually have to breathe in order to blow that. And also, when you think about it, bubbles make you smile because it relates to childhood.
Yeah.
Now, if I knew someone well enough, I could give them bubbles and then just, okay, let's go ahead and take a moment here. But if I needed to do it to de-escalate a situation, I would walk away and do that and say, you know what, I'll get back with you in, say, 10 minutes.
Maybe do that when you have a hard meeting. Okay, everybody, let's break out the bubbles.
Yes, there's a cohort of engineers I worked with, a billion-dollar manufacturing plant, and they are under a lot of stress. And I would always bring bubbles because we did 90-minute sessions. I would always bring bubbles, put them in, and I also brought smelly cookies, put them in the middle of the table. If anybody felt as they were sharing what was happening, felt they needed, just go ahead and grab those bubbles.
Very good. I've always been someone who supports. I remember in kindergarten when I would always look forward to is the little nap time where you would have your blanket, your pillow, and the teacher, you'd literally lay down on the floor in the classroom and take a 20-minute, half-hour nap. Sometimes I think in companies we need to do that too. Okay, everybody, break out your pillow and your blanket and let's lay down for a half hour.
or follow Google's formula and have, ping pong tables and walking treadmills, and they have so much. They actually have hammocks. So yeah, that can definitely help.
I've heard taking time out to do some coloring.
Mm-hmm.
It just, even though it sounds childish, it sounds unproductive. It's amazing when you look at some of the companies that do these things, and they tend to be very tight companies, very productive companies, very successful companies. So the way we do business in the past is not always going to be how we do business in the future. So
that's for sure.
It's evolving. It's changing all the time. But the one thing I definitely would love to see evolve out of businesses and even personal life is toxic situations, because they're not healthy for either business or personal life.
No, there definitely are not. So we are coming to the end of our time together. So Jim, do you have a last thought you would like to share?
For the thought that I would like to share is, in this, as I said earlier, this is something that impacted me when I was much younger as a professional. If you're in a toxic situation, you have to be able to talk to somebody about it, and you have to resolve that, because if you continually allow that to impact you, it's not going to get any better for you. And it can not only impact your business life, but also your personal life as well. And so you want to make sure that you do address these toxic situations, either yourself. In some situations, maybe the toxic situation really requires someone being brought in to help out in that process. But never keep it inside, never blame yourself. And to what you had said, MJ, sometimes you need to stand your ground and own it. And I think that for me, it's a great takeaway, is to sometimes you need to stand your ground and own it.
So my last tip would be, take a look at the 5 people, going back to Jim Rohn's circle of influence. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? And then go through, are they naysayers? Are they nitpickers? Are they energy zappers? And think about those 3 areas and put an X near each name in case if those hit any of those 3 areas. And then think about who you could have in your circle of influence that would be better for you, more productive, more positive. And then find a way to tame your conversations with the people that are more negative and increase your time with people who are more positive and add more energy to your life.
Very good. So MJ, how can people get in contact with you?
Oh, they can find me on my website, mjcallaway.com, and it's Callaway like Callaway Golf. Even though I'm not related, I wish I were. I'd have a great set of clubs.
Yeah, actually, that's what I have in my garage right now.
Nice. I use Callaway golf balls. Would love to have the golf clubs.
Yeah.
Callaway Golf, if you're listening, I'd be happy to take a set.
And for me, you can catch my streams on Wednesday afternoon and noon Eastern Daylight Time, or soon it's going to be Eastern Standard Time, called Build Out, and then on Monday evenings and Thursday evenings as well. And that's Build Out Brief, and a lot of great topics related to business, sales, marketing, social media, influencer, and also to when it comes to content creation. So MJ, as always, I'm so blessed and honored to be a co-host with you, and what an amazing broadcast that you do every Thursday here at noon.
Thank you, Jim. And I am so grateful for you and Build Out Productions. And those of you who are not familiar with Jim and Build Out Productions, he actually is the brainstorm behind my broadcast and several others. He does all the behind the scenes. So grateful for you. And we will be talking about gratitude in 2 weeks. So be sure to tune in every Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time next week.
Yeah, definitely. Time changes are coming.
All right. Until next Thursday, remember to have a bounce up day.